Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. This is me, unshaven, ready for action this morning. Um, really excited that today we have guests coming on, which is always a pleasure. Today's guest is none other than Stephanie Simon. She is the head of community at Clubhouse. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, this is me, man. This is it's been a really, in fact, I wasn't even gonna do today's show because we are so busy right now. We are so busy working on the launch of an incredible conference that's happening next week called the New City. If you're interested in coming, it's going to be a great conversation with about 30 or 40 leaders in cities and culture and architects, and we have we have the Andrew Yang as a keynote. We have Sir David Adjaye. We have a lot. So it's been a little busy. Like I said, I wasn't going to do today's show, but I realized that next week we're going to be doing this conference. So if you're interested in the New City, send me a text, 415-843-8100. Just put cities, New City. I don't know. I use machine learning. I'll find you. 415-843-8100. Text me. So today, as mentioned, we have a guest. That guest will be Stephanie Simon. She is the head of community at Clubhouse. Ironic, maybe. I don't know. But I had not done a newsletter in 3 months. And yesterday I launched our Culture and Code newsletter. The title is, Would You Rather Be a Hallway or a Room? And they were reflections of me taking 30 days off of Clubhouse and off of social media to really focus on, building the Authenticated. We're opening up membership. We're preparing for the end of the year Culture and Code. Just had to focus on my business. And I took some time away from Clubhouse and some of the other social media places that were distractions. And so, offered some reflections in my newsletter. I also in the newsletter talk a lot about just cities because we have this new city thing. I've been really focused on this idea of cities and what is a city, what is a community. For me, I feel like we're living in communities that feel like cities in the cloud, and that your network is essentially this community that you're building. And for us at the Authenticated, ours is a marketplace of buyer and seller, people who have ideas, people who have capital, putting them together. Those are a lot of the models that I was working on when I was away in my lab and not distracted by the things that one could get distracted by, in particular on Clubhouse. So it was really good to both to both spend that time away, but then also to process those thoughts and those feelings in this week's newsletter. So if you have not read this week's newsletter, I highly recommend that you should read this week's newsletter. What else am I working on? Oh man, I'm just been on a roll. Thank you for those who watched last week's episode with Omar Tom from Dubai. That episode and that interview with Omar, who I've known for a very long time, has resulted in a series of conversations I've had about Dubai and about culture in Dubai and about some things that we're planning in the Middle East. I can't really go any further into it, but we are really excited that Dubai, UAE, Israel, all those parts of the world are back on my radar, and back in our consciousness and conversation. If you don't know, there's a lot going on now that there's sort of things happening between Israel and Dubai. So, I have spent significant time in both of those parts of the world. And I am excited by some conversations we're having about, some authenticated opportunities there. We'll just leave it at that. So really excited for those of you that tuned in to last week's conversation with Omar from Dubai. He was great, and he really, just reminded all of us that, being a third culture kid, which I consider myself to be, kind of on the older end of the spectrum, but I feel like I grew up as a third culture kid. My mother was born in Italy to a German Jew. My father was from the Bahamas. And, when you're from the Bay Area and you grew up as a mixed kid, which pretty much everybody feels like they're mixed with something, you do this interesting thing through identity of bobbing and weaving. But I feel like the Bay Area, at least in the 80s and 90s Bay Area, offered a really great playground to do that, because so many of us were living in these interesting identities. So, yeah, excited about the last conversation and last week, and equally excited about what's to come. This has been what a year, guys! Like, geez. When I think about this year and all the things we've done, really, really proud of the work that we're doing at Other America. Not sure if you guys watched that. We did a whole thing on the Georgia Senate race on Other America. Other America is another show that I do with a woman named Shira Lazar, and we lean into conversations about equity and diversity and racism and white supremacy and anti-racism and all kinds of things that we cover on that show. And last week we leaned into the Georgia Senate race with a bunch of incredible folks who are on the ground working there in Georgia. Georgia is a state that I moved to LA from. For those of you that don't know or don't know my background, I lived in Atlanta for close to 15 years. Consider myself a part of that fabric, even though I still live in LA. Atlanta is always in my heart. My family's there. And so therefore, Atlanta is sort of like a second city for me. I feel like I have yet to leave it. There's, if you think about Atlanta, between the Gucci Jeezy versus and the political race, it seems to be the center of conversation. And it's a great city. The state of Georgia is in a very interesting space. And for those of you that are have family in Georgia, encourage them to get out and vote in January. My man, Raphael Warnock, who I knew during my time in Atlanta, was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is Dr. King's church in Atlanta, is running in a highly contested race. Obviously, it's a runoff in the state of Georgia, as well as John Ossoff. John Ossoff, alumni of Paideia School my kids went to in Atlanta. It's pretty ugly there, to say the least, pretty ugly. And I think, one of the things I've been thinking about is in 2021, that the bridge builder is highly valued. The ability to bring together folks is a skill set that I think will be rewarded. I think that archetype is important, moving into 2021 as we have a country divided. And so I've been thinking a lot about my bridge building. It's obviously what we do at the Authenticated. We build a lot of bridges. I always say that I'm building a bridge from Peachtree Road to Sunset Boulevard or Pacific Coast Highway, sort of an LA to Atlanta metaphorical bridge. I'm building a bridge definitely between Sunset and PCH and Sheikh Zayed Road in Dubai, between Sheikh Zayed Road in Dubai to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, all those kinds of bridges that need to be built. We are here for that. And it's a lot of stuff that we're doing behind the scenes. And so I think that the bridge builder is highly, highly valued moving forward. And I also think that another hypothesis, which I've been talking a lot about lately, is that 2022 will be the year of the creative. It'll be the year when the folks that are involved in creative industries start to really understand, DTC, memberships and subscriptions, data. And I believe that when you put that together with creative entrepreneurs, and I'm just going to label it all like that, you have the makings of a really interesting 2022. I think 2021 will be the rise of some of these things I just mentioned. So DTC, subscription businesses. We're involved in some things in that area, in the commerce side. Got some exciting things coming to you for us on the DTC side and the subscription side. And I just feel like I'm excited about when the creative entrepreneur understands their value first and foremost. I think that's something I've observed as of lately is the first thing before you even, as a creative, is you have to understand and recognize your own value. And you have to understand and recognize like what you're bringing to the table as a creative entrepreneur. And so I think 2021 is about understanding your value and understanding the tools that allow you to build a business on top of that value. So I think that's going to be 2021's sort of thing. And I think in 2022, when we're moving around more and we have this hybrid kind of thing that's happening, that 2022 will be the explosive year when all of these creative folks, myself included, I call myself an artist trapped in a business person's body a lot. But 2022 is going to be when all of this kind of comes together. So value creation, creativity, art, whatever your thing is, understanding of data, machine learning, blockchain, all that kind of stuff, right? And then 2022, we have this renaissance because we always have this pent up energy. Yeah, someone just said the pandemic and quarantine will create a boom of creativity that is gestating right now. Bingo to you, whoever said that. Yes. So that's kind of that's what I feel is like there's this combustible energy happening right now that we'll see the fruits of in 2022. And so what we're thinking a lot about at the Authenticated is, what are the tools, what are the companies, what are the technologies, and who are the people that will define that 2022 explosion? And then on the front end of that, this idea of value, because it's a lot of what I've been thinking about, especially relative to Clubhouse. For those of you that are on Clubhouse, a lot of the conversations are about, man, we especially Black folks, we in there loud right now. We in there real loud, and we in there like hollering about, this idea that we as Black people, make things hot, make things popular. And we do. We show up, we certainly make it popular. But I think the front end of that value creation is understanding your own value, and then being able to understand like how to build your own infrastructure so you can take advantage of the value and the value chain. So anyway, so 2022 is, I believe, going to be the most explosive year for the creative entrepreneur. It's when they recognize their value, start to understand technology at a much deeper level than social media, right? Like really understand technology, really understand. Like I actually advised this artist. She came to me a few years ago, and she was like, like a lot of artists, I want to get a record deal. I want to do that, And I'm like, man, like you have everything you need to be successful within your own camp. Like, why are you going to get all these things, And I think for young people who are listening, like you truly have everything you need to be successful. You just need to organize your resources differently. So when I advise a lot of young people, I'm like, you already got it all. You got it all there, but you're thinking that a record label or whatever the big tower is going to be, you got to come to the table knowing your value and then building some infrastructure. And then things like Clubhouse or these other places where you're starting to create your brand have a little more resonance, but no one's going to pay you just because you're black and cool like that. I mean, I've been black and cool for a really long time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it ain't really like you still have to build a business under being black and cool. So I really I guess, the Clubhouse conversations have just only heightened my self-awareness over the business of cool, and also made me zoom out to recognize that like, it's great that I am well traveled and that I understand different cultures and I understand different parts of the world. But if there wasn't a business infrastructure underneath that, then I'm just like the cool kid. Like, what does that really mean? So speaking of the cool kid, I see her in the green room. She got I'm unshaven. I got like a tired beach surfer dad hat on. When I show this grand entrance, we're going to shut down the whole thing. So my guest is here. Welcome.
Hello, James.
What's up?
How are you, honey? I'm good.
Look at that. God damn. I mean, my hat game. I think he did that. He's going to have a strong hat game. I know he always wears hats. I've got to come above his hat game. And
my hats keep getting taller and bigger, and I don't know what it is. And now when I put on what was formerly a big hat, I'm like, no, it's just I feel small. So yeah. I don't know what's happening. This one's, I mean, if we're talking about hats for a second, and like to give Nick a plug. So essentially, we sewed in one of my vintage scarves in the back, so I can wear it total like Watso style if I want.
Wait, who's Nick? Ooh, that's
Nick Fouquet. Sorry,
yeah,
the guy that makes my hats.
Well,
he's Nick Fouquet.
You have your own milliner?
I have my own hat maker. Everyone, hey, people underestimate a good hat. This is why, because you don't have to fix your hair. This is perfect. It's a perfect quarantine thing.
When I was a dreadlock wearer, that was my Now I'm just have hair. I'm just a regular guy.
No, you're not. You've been black and cool for a long time.
I've been black and cool for a long time. That's gonna be a tweet. Well, on milliners, I do want to introduce you to Teresa Foglia. Do you know her?
I don't know her, but I've heard of her for sure. I know a lot of friends that that have had her hat.
She's a friend of mine. She has a store in Malibu and in Brooklyn. Shout out to Teresa Foglia. We are both in the Soho House Mafia. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Steph Simon. Well, when you talk about wearing hats that make you taller, how tall are you when you don't have the hat on?
5'11". Yeah, I used to say 6 feet when I played basketball, but now I have no reason to like upsize myself. So I give the real height.
That's so funny because I used to tell people I was 5'11", and I'm shorter than you. So now there's no. You're only.
But that's a very male thing to do, right? Like as a woman, we're always wanting to be small, and we want to. But now, I'm like, fuck it, I'm 5'11".
Would you grow up want to be small? Is that a thing when you're tall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends how you grow up.
Yeah.
I grew up in a family of all Lebanese women who are generally small women, and I think I also just associated that with like men want to forget about supermodels for a minute, because when you're in the middle of Oklahoma, which is where I grew up, that wasn't like a thing you aspired to be. And I think being feminine was like being small and cute, especially when you're in your formative years, like middle school, whatever, right? So I think, you want to be desirable was to be like cute and small. And I was never been that. So, yeah.
Yeah. But you've always been black and cool.
Exactly.
So we have that part. You've been black and cool too for a very long time.
I love that so much.
But if my merchandising team is listening, that's going to be a shirt, by the way. That's a T-shirt.
Black and cool.
Every great idea, I always say, starts as a T-shirt. It goes from hashtag the T-shirt to to market.
I got a DM last night from a guy that's like, hey, do you guys have anyone making Clubhouse merch yet? I'd like to make it for you. I have a big manufacturing place. I was like, I don't know if we need that yet, but maybe we do need that. And so we're
Well, you
gonna call.
do.
Yeah,
No,
you're right.
first
It
of
all
all,
starts with merch. It all starts with merch.
put that guy on pause. I have a whole merch strategy for you guys already. I had a great call yesterday with a founder who is going to help us specialize in drop culture. So we're going to take ideas, take conversations, and go from ideas. Like literally, I'm kind of joking, not joking.
Yeah, no, that's the tangible thing. The product is the tangible thing to signal the drop, but the drops are other cultural, your cultural and code moments. Yeah, I love it. Great.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about that. Follow up squad. Okay, so let's spend. Okay, so we have like 40 minutes together. Let's dive into the Steph origin story a little bit. I know most of it, so I'm gonna take people on a little journey. In Oklahoma, you were once born. Oh, I know it's so boring.
Which is where I am. By the way, this is a perfect place to begin because it's where I'm sitting right now in the house I grew up in.
Oh, this is amazing. Okay, this is perfect. So take us back to that house. This is great. What city is it in? What's the closest metropolis? And who is Stephanie at that time?
So it's not a city. It's Clinton. It's a town. It's very much a town. Clinton, Oklahoma. It's a town of about 6,000 people. Western Oklahoma. Right on Route 66. For any of you guys know, yeah. Yes. Close to metropolis, Oklahoma City. It's about an hour and a half, about 90 miles. But it's also pretty close, like just on the really close to the Texas Panhandle. Not too far from Amarillo, Texas either. So we're kind of in the middle of like farmland. My backyard I always joke to people that my backyard is a wheat field with an oil rig in it, but neither of which is ours. My dad's, I grew up a dentist. My dad is a Lebanese dentist. So despite having grown up in a small town in Oklahoma, like I don't think I ever really identified with being like an Oklahoman, or certainly in the ways that I think now as an adult, how I hear the reflection of what people think Oklahoma is, certainly rural Oklahoma. But Stephanie at that time was just like always outside, always playing in the neighborhood, literally would not come home until dark, played every sport under the sun. I was a total little athlete, tomboy, but also like super go-getter. Like I realized at a really early age that the way out was just like to like get accolades as much as possible to make it like impossible for me to be ignored by anyone else outside.
Wow.
And like literally I knew that at an early age, and like I hate even admitting this, but it's the truth. Like I don't think I really ever wanted to play sports in college, but like I knew that was a thing that would not necessarily get me an education. It wasn't that mentality, because you hear that mentality a lot, like, oh, it's going to be my ticket. I knew I was going to go to college, but I knew that it would forever be a thing that people be like, oh, Steph Simon, she played. I think it was like more about prestige, interestingly. And it took me a long time to get past that. Like just gathering accolades for prestige versus like just doing the things I wanted. Anyway, so yeah, that's where I started. Clinton, Oklahoma, playing sports, getting dirty, doing all the things you do in rural Oklahoma.
And small town, I'm sure as a star athlete, you're sort of known in that small 6,000 town, and that's pretty.
Oh yeah, well, it was like a combo of being like star athlete. I mean, yes, of course, everybody knew me both because I was a star athlete, but also because my dad was like the town dentist and on the school board, was the president of the OU Alumni Association, which is like OU, University of Oklahoma. It's like, yeah, my dad, people knew my dad and people knew us, interestingly, because like I said, at one point in time, my grandfather and his 4 brothers all moved here when they were, really young and stayed here. And they all had at least 10, like 10 kids, 4 kids, 10 kids, 4 kids. So at one point there was like 100 Simons in this town. And if we became like, oh, you're one of those Clinton Simons, people would say. And like my family had like a department store on Main Street, like a clothing department store for 50 years.
Got it.
So yeah. The
Okay,
Simons were a thing in Clinton, Oklahoma. Yeah.
got it. And then you go from Clinton, you get to play basketball at the University of Oklahoma. Your father went to Oklahoma, so this is a lineage thing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. My grandfather went to Oklahoma. My father went to
Oh,
Oklahoma. My mom went to Oklahoma. Oh, yeah,
okay, got it. So there was really
yeah.
no other place that you probably thought about going?
No, that's not true. So I went. I didn't tell my parents, but I applied to University of Georgia, Stanford, North Carolina, Arizona. I applied to all these other schools,
Oh,
and I got into them.
oh,
And then I was like going to decide where I was going to go to school. And then I tore my ACL, which is total backwards thinking. But I tore my ACL in the All-State game, and for whatever reason, I felt like, oh, I need someone to take care of me and like help me heal. Oh, I should play basketball, because the coach was like, Steph, come to Oklahoma. You can go rehabilitate your knees. Because they knew I didn't really want to play. Like, because I actually was debating whether to play tennis or basketball, because I wanted to play tennis in college as much as I did basketball. Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, there you go. I ended up at Oklahoma, which was crazy because everybody in my family, of course, was happy about that. But at the time, the OU women's basketball program was not great.
Oh,
Like,
good.
shit, not great. And so it wasn't like, oh wow, I mean, yes,
Right.
it's a D1 program, but then while I was there, and it wasn't necessarily correlated to my being there, but we became one of the top programs in the country. And by the time I was a junior, we lost in the national championship to Connecticut. Like, we were like, it was literally like an ascension, and I happened to be there during that time, and it was pretty.
So
Yeah,
cool.
it was pretty amazing, actually. Yeah.
But I love how you characterize it as sort of like how a black person would say, like your ticket out of the out of the mind ghetto. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked once about how you did these things, and you talked about a little bit about you excelled so that it could take you into other worlds. And then so when you got out of Oklahoma, you went to law school after that. You went straight
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I went to law school. I went to law school, and then I was a practicing lawyer. I was an M&A and securities lawyer at a law firm in Atlanta, Georgia, called
Yeah.
was Troutman Sanders at the time. Now I think it's called Troutman Pepper. There's been a couple acquisitions, but yeah, I was a little baby lawyer in Atlanta, Georgia, with
And
long hair, highlighted, like doing the that was like one chapter.
right. And
Um,
not to mention you were dating the quarterback or something, or you weren't
oh
you?
yeah, no, I
Oh,
ended
yeah.
up marrying that. I ended up marrying the quarterback. Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier, but what are the things that a young girl from Western Oklahoma aspires to be? Probably before anything else, maybe the wife of the quarterback at the University of Oklahoma is pretty high up there. And it's weird because I don't know if it's like I never saw I never had a boyfriend ever growing up. I was like, I'm doing my own shit. I don't have time. But Nate was really like my first boyfriend in college, and then we're still friends today. But yeah, it was a weird thing to kind of be the girlfriend of, but also be an athlete and have my own shit going on, and never identifying myself as like the wag or whatever. But then I remember being in law school and going to, he ended up playing for the Cleveland Browns for a couple of years and then Jacksonville Jaguars for a year. And I remember in law school, I went to like some of the first games of the Browns and in Cleveland. And I was like looking at all the other girlfriends and wives, and it was just like playmate of the year, playgirl. Oh, I'm in law school. Yeah, nice to meet you, girl. It's so great. And they're like, well, when do you come back to Cleveland? I was like, well, probably not. I have finals next week, so it was a real trip. It was a trip.
I totally forgot about this chapter of your life. You've
Yeah.
seen so much. Oh my gosh, this is going to be great. We're only in our mid-20s at this point. Okay, so we're in our mid-20s, and we're in Atlanta. And did you really connect with Atlanta, or were you one of the people who just lived there, had a job, and just kind of like went to work?
Yeah, no, I think unfortunately the latter. But I talk about this now with Clubhouse. So much of our community right now is Atlanta, and I have calls like every day with someone from Atlanta. It feels like, and I feel this like real pit in my stomach that I never knew. Well, to be fair, probably in 2006 through 9, which is when I was there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the Atlanta that it is today, but it was still like pockets of fucking, really cool, brilliant things. And, I was living in Peachtree Hills, like dual income, no kids, all white people with their picket fences and their houses and their cars and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really dip into Atlanta like that. I know I would if I, now who I'm around in the culture that I've usually, so it's really interesting. But I didn't dip into Atlanta at that time.
Give yourself a break. I was obviously in Atlanta at that time. You have to really be connected in the culture at 2006 to 2009. To your point, not the Atlanta it is today. And it would have taken a lot. And it also, like, being a bridge builder, I was like a person in Atlanta, was like bringing the worlds together. Fadia, same thing. Fadia, who has been pretty active on Clubhouse, used to throw a party called Broken Bougie, and it was like,
yeah, she told me about this.
It was like the party that like black folks and white folks and cool kids and would all kind of come together in Atlanta. So I think 2006 to 2009, because Atlanta is a city that's been through like a lot of transitions. There is no Pot City Market or these things that exist now, or these amazing real estate things. And it was a weird time for the music industry, just to lay some context too, because I find that was like that was the moment when, like, I feel like the bottom of the pit was falling out. Music industry was struggling. So Atlanta felt like the creative energy felt like something soon would come, but it was in this in between period. I happened to lose a friend. At this point for me, I was like out of the music industry and fully into advertising. And I ended up losing a friend to suicide, who was a guy named Shakir Stewart, who was a pretty big executive at Def Jam. And I'll never forget, I spoke at his funeral, and I was with all these like former music guys, and it just felt like not only was a somber moment, but it also felt like the Great Depression a little bit, like in the record. And thus Atlanta, which supplies so much of the creativity, because the industry was in this really Great Depression. Atlanta was just, the creative energy was like weird and stagnant. So anyway, the years you were there, 2006 to 2009, you become a lawyer, you're married to the college quarterback. What made you leave the law firm, and where'd you go from there?
Yeah. So 2008 happened, the crash. And as a M&A and securities lawyer, that was pretty fatal, especially essentially all the deals dried up that we were working on. And as a young lawyer in a law firm, you're kind of like at that tipping point of like, you're not making so much money that they need to cut you loose, but they definitely needed to downsize, and they also needed to start to repurpose us to other places. So I was put in the bucket of repurpose her to employee benefits law. And I was like, no, I don't think, at least there was something sexy about, sitting as a baby, even a baby M&A lawyer, sitting with the executives of companies that were about to do an IPO or, have a securities offering. And I think that was like really eye-opening for me, because I was a poli-sci and art history minor. So I really knew nothing about finance. I knew nothing about, kind of how the stock markets worked, et cetera. So it was like a crash course in a lot of things as a baby lawyer. But anyway, as I got repurposed, I was also kind of coming to terms a bit more with who I was and what I wanted. And that was also not to be married and living in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I ended up getting a headhunter call from Goldman Sachs for private banking. And I was like, what's private banking? Again, I've never taken a finance course or anything like that. And they're like, oh, we're looking for a profile. And that's like such a white thing to say, right? We're looking for a profile, not a career background. You'll be fine. And so, I took the call, and I was like, all right. I sussed out pretty quickly that like it was a sexy job offer, but that the way Goldman worked was that they kind of gave you the business card and put you out on your way, and it was like, go get him, Tiger. Right. And given that I knew literally nothing about personal finances or sort of, how to advise anyone, which is, a whole other lesson around like what were they really looking for when they set a profile. Anyway, were they just looking for like a pretty young, good looking woman, whatever. Anyway, so I ended up taking a couple interviews with JP Morgan and Citi, and I took the job with JP Morgan, and I went up to New York for training. and I never came back to Atlanta. So I came, it was kind of that was like first like real shift in my life where I came back and told my family actually like right about now, that 2010.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Came home for Thanksgiving and just said, I'm getting a divorce and I'm moving to New York and I'm changing jobs. So
wow.
Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
So
So
one complete decade later, this is so interesting.
One decade later,
you're back in Clinton. And what big news do you have for this Thanksgiving?
I'm engaged. Yes, I'm getting married and I'm moving back to the States and I've got a new job. Yeah, it's weird, right?
That's so interesting. It's interesting how going back home and markers in time always are these reflective moments. Wow, what a decade you've had. So in this decade, let's breeze through. So you end up going into banking, but then like you've done so many things in this decade since the last time you were in Clinton for Thanksgiving. Well, I don't know if that's the last time. Is it the last time you were in Clinton for Thanksgiving?
No. Lebanese family, you kidding me? If I waited that long, they would have disowned me by now. No. You come home every year. Oh yeah. But it was a weird decade. You know, I spent 5 years at JP Morgan, so half of the decade, as a private banker. Wow. And then that's a longer story for another time, why I left and how I left. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it really was my first entree then into more creative industries. I went out, this is actually a fun story. I went out to LA. Actually, I was headed to San Francisco to interview with a bunch of venture capital funds at the time, specifically Sequoia. And then I actually had a little sit down with Shervin Pishavar, who we both know. And Shervin was like, no, you don't need to go to one of the big firms. You need to come to somewhere like us. And it was kind of like, and at a time that probably would have been a smart idea because Uber was like, and they were one of the first, investors in Uber. But I was down in LA and seeing a friend of mine from Summit, Jason White. And Jason was like, you don't have a job right now? I was like, no, I'm just trying to figure things out. I left JP Morgan. He was like, I want you to meet my boss, Omar Johnson and Jimmy Iovine. And I was like, at Beats? I was like, okay. I was like, why? He was like, oh, I think they'll want to hire you. And I was like, okay, fine. So I go in that next day. I had not met Omar. I had not met Jimmy. I'm sitting in the office waiting for my meeting. And all of a sudden, like, Omar's assistant was like, oh, they want you in Jimmy's office. So I go up and I enter the office and there's like 7 people in there. And there's like 7 simultaneous meetings taking place. No shit. Like literally, it's like, this guy's pitching Jimmy on this commercial. They want to review the Kanye piece for Valentine's Day. Like I remember today, there's like all 7 meetings. I'm just like sitting there like, what in the hell is happening? And like Jimmy's like rolling through because he used his phone. They called it like the magic iPod. And it would be like, whatever song was going to be broken in the next Beats commercial, he would just like spin through, pick it and go. Like literally that's how it works. And at one point, like they stopped. It was after we reviewed the Kanye piece for Valentine's Day. And he was like, what did you think? And I was like, mind you, I've been a private banker for the last 5 years of my life. And I was like, well, I thought it's okay. It depends what you're trying to communicate. Like, I don't know why you're like, this is early also. He and Kim, this is early in their days. And so I don't know. Like I said something, whatever I said, he was like, yeah, I think she's okay. Omar, yeah. Like literally, he literally said, Omar, yeah. And Omar was like, all right, let's go. That was like my approval.
Wow.
And I had a couple more meetings with Omar and Jason. And I took the job as head of influencer marketing at Beats by Dre just after the Apple acquisition. So it was like a pivotal moment for Beats.
Yeah.
Pivotal moment for me. I learned a lot in that year, mostly that I need to actually understand how corporate marketing departments work before I headed up a department. Yeah. So I ended up leaving and going, but like so many amazing things during that time. Straight out of Compton campaign, I was like integral part of that. And that was one of the most amazing things still to this day that I've ever gotten to work on. And to see how something actually goes viral and how it really has to start with like community, which I think has brought a lot of important tones for this new role. Sure. But after that, I started working with will.i.am on his tech company at I Am Plus in Los Angeles. It's called I Am Plus. And the mission was to create like a cooler AI operating system. And her name was Anita. And we'd raised a shit ton of money to do so. But ultimately what I ended up doing was taking the headphone that we were going to use as like, it was like the first thing that would house Anita. You know, if you think about the hardware software, like what was she married to? And so I took those headphones and did the go-to-market for them. So I did the retail strategy and the marketing strategy, and that included a lot of fashion retail channels and partners, including Gucci and Versace. So 2 years into working with Will, I moved to London, and
Hold on.
yeah.
The story is so good that it's. I think we need to pause and reflect. Okay, 1 minute you're in Jimmy Iovine's office telling him that song is going to work for a commercial. So let me right now. What are the trips back to Clinton, Oklahoma sound like? And what is Thanksgiving dinner? You know, it must have been really interesting. We'll get to that. You clearly had found your rocket ship into creativity and your credibility. and the title of this talk today is kind of the art of the pivot. And so I wonder if you reflect on like how the star athlete from Oklahoma, lawyer, banker, finds herself in Jimmy Iovine's office. Like what are the, and we've talked about this before, like you've never worked in a record label before. What you talk about is what I experienced in my career so much, is these larger than life characters like a Jimmy Iovine, for those who don't know, who before he created Beats by Dre, ran Interscope Records. What are you feeling in the same way when Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs called you and you were like, I can't do it? Is there this, I'll just figure this shit out and get it done kind of thing when you're in the office? Or did you feel like I'm ready for this shit? Like this is me?
I think I always had this sense, well, I was always down to do something crazy, like, because it felt, again, once I started making the decisions at age 28, 29, that I could do what I wanted, or at least try anything I wanted, which was, again, that was sort of the departure from being a lawyer and getting a divorce. And for the first time saying like, I'm going to do what I want. Then I think to be totally candid, I think a part of it was just like, jump and I'll figure it out. And I think that really worked for me in private banking because I had such a support system around me. Like, it's a massive corporate entity, right? Like you're paired up with another banker, you have an assistant, you have an associate, like all of these things. It also kind of worked at Beats. Same idea. Like the thing is, I knew though at Beats that there was a transferable skill set. Like I clearly could see it, which was, I knew that not just like people, and when I talk to young people a lot, they'll say like, oh, I like people too. I really like people. I'm like, it's not about just liking people. It's really being able to understand very quickly. Like I knew I always had this talent of sitting across from someone and ascertaining very quickly, something about them that I could relate to them, again, really quickly, but not just relate in a way of like selling them something, but of figuring out how we could there could be a value exchange between the two of us. And that worked really well as a private banker.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to work really well as a head of influencer marketing, because ultimately it's the same thing. You're sitting across from someone and there is a specific thing you are supposed to sell them. I.e., when I was a private banker, it was financial products. Give me your money, I'll do this. But there was a whole other set of like sort of relationship dynamics you had to sort in order to actually keep a client. Same thing at Beats, right? Like we had a stable of like 45 athletes. Yes, my job was just to make sure that whatever the contract that LeBron said, we pay you X and in return you put these headphones on for these specific amount of time. But the relationship is something far greater than that. And it's sort of like figuring out how to deliver them the unexpected value.
Yeah.
And I've always just I've always known how to do that. It wasn't something I learned. And I think I've always known that I had that. And so that was like that pivot. And that's how I knew that pivot wouldn't be tough. But the thing I didn't anticipate was just that the other dynamics happening at the time, that Apple had acquired a Beats, and the one thing they probably would have liked to shut down first was paying people to wear the product, because that was something that was so core against Apple, right? The product spoke for itself. You didn't need to put the product on someone else. I didn't know that dynamic. I think I also didn't understand the other dynamic, which was I was stepping into a team that had just been cleared out.
Right.
And the other people that were left there from the music industry were people who had been lifers in the music industry and worked their asses off to be on the music marketing team at Beats by Dre. And I didn't know shit about music. And that was like, I am not one of those people that feels comfortable like telling someone what to do when I know I don't know any more than they do. And so I think it created a really interesting dynamic, and I was very sensitive to that. And yeah, I think it showed me like, okay, this is how a proper marketing department works. Like to this day, you know, when I sit, you know, both at Will and we interview different creative agencies, and now even at Clubhouse when I'm sort of starting to talk to agencies and look at people for social media candidates, I know what good is because of Beats. Like I know what what good execution is like from A to Z. So yeah, that was like, I don't know. It's interesting. That time at Beats was short, but like I learned a lot and took it with me to Will.i.am.
I think, I want to talk about Will.i.am. I think what I really appreciate about you, and I feel like I think about I think this is where we're aligned, is this idea of being self-aware. There's this thing in Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 that says that everything is sales, whether it's viral marketing or or exiting a company. It's all a series of simple to complex sales transactions. And when I heard you kind of talk through that whole thing of like sitting across from LeBron is like sitting across being at JP Morgan, I think about this idea that, you know, and I never really called myself a salesperson, but I recognized when I read 0 to 1 and Peter Thiel and used this framework that everything in life is sort of a series of simple to complex sales transactions. And what's most important is the relationship. Because like LeBron is in 20 different deals that says he has to do 3 tweets and 4 blog posts or whatever. But when you're in the currency of influence, forget the contract. Like it's like if they believe in the people there and the product and the mission, then you're trading on a different level of currency, which is sort of why I think you're really good at what you do is because you can sort of like see transactional, but like live in humanity at the same time, like in a way that most people, especially from the corporate side, they don't really do that really well. They're either like overly cultural and cool kid or overly like lawyer, you know, and it's that to bob and weave around that. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge your hat.
Yeah. No. Well, I think it's funny because the profile, for instance, the headshot that I gave you for today, you can see like on the side, it's kind of an old headshot. It was just after LeBron had so this is a perfect example of the difference between we pay LeBron X amount.
Yeah.
For a specific activation was one of the things that would have been on the list. And this activation was while they were in the NBA finals, we set up like a barber shop in their hotel. The only thing that was required was for us to put the branding up and to kind of go and like bullshit with the team, right? But the difference is you can go and just sit in the room. That's one like level of the execution of the activations. But then on the other end, if you have the relationship sort of, you know, I sat in there for a while. LeBron starts giving me shit about that I need a haircut. And I'm like, are you going to give me a haircut? And he's like, yes, Steph. He's like, we're both lefties. Come on. Because we're both lefties. Like we write with our left hand, but we play basketball with our woman, but we play basketball with our right hand. We're both the same in that way.
Interesting.
And so he was like, sit in the chair. I'm going to give you a haircut. And like, that's the difference. Like you get the shot of just them hanging out, or you get the shot of LeBron giving a haircut, right? There's just 2 different opportunities. Like there's 2 outcomes there, and the difference is like relationship management. And so anyway,
so sorry, you're gonna finish. Was that photo related?
Yeah, so the photo. Yeah. So the photo. Then we have this amazing like photo and video of him like chatting shit to Kevin Love. And he's like, Love, when LeBron gave me a fade. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually in the photo in this headshot, Jonathan Mannion, he's an incredible hip hop photographer. He
Wow.
did my headshot. Yeah, he did my headshot, and it was like right after LeBron had given me a haircut. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. Talk to me about this journey through Will I Am. You're there, leads you into fashion, which then takes you geographically to another part of the world. And then let's talk about that, and then we'll come to what you do today.
Yeah. So, like I said, the headphones that we launched, they're called Buttons, and the whole premise was that they were more like a fashion accessory than a consumer electronic product. And so, because of that, all of our retail channels, like I said, was like Barney's and Colette in Paris and Neiman Marcus and, Selfridges in London and Harrods, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the partnerships that we had done was with Gucci, and at their cruise show, it was like this massive unveiling. It was a big moment for us, like as a small company. And I remember Will and I were like in the van on the way to the show in London. It was actually at Westminster Abbey. And after the show, there was an after party, of course. And at this after party, I ended up meeting this very cheeky Englishman, who then became my boyfriend. And a year later, I moved to be with him in London. But like I said, it was interesting because people that I had met in the fashion industry through Will, they really, and this is so interesting when you talk about the art of a pivot, people can really, if they perceive you as something, they will fully believe that. It doesn't matter what your career background is. It doesn't matter what, like, I was a lawyer with highlighted hair that went to here. If I would have been walked into fashion houses, then they would not blink twice. But I was a 6 foot tall, like shaved, blonde mohawk, going to, fashion shows with Will I Am. So of course I worked in fashion. Of course, it's like, and it was a really interesting thing because when I moved to London and I ended up Will and I decided like it was gonna be too hard to sort of still work with I Am Plus there. And so my first job in London was I worked with a fashion photographer. His name was Mario Testino, who's like one of the most famous fashion photographers in the world, helping him think about how to monetize or sort of like, I should say, diversify the revenue streams from his archive, which again, never done that before, but I was like, okay, it's essentially biz dev. It's essentially like being creative about like, was there an experience that we could use the archives for? Like, it was always I always love this combination of like revenue and creativity. I think to this day, that's why I'm focused on what I'm focused on right now at Clubhouse, which we'll get to that. But yeah, 6 months after that, and it was great because he's giving me a visa, which is a massive thing if you're ever trying to work in another country. 6 months after that, the New York Times article came out and called him a sexual predator, and the whole business of Mario Testino was shut down at that point. And so then I started working, kind of going back to the drawing board in London and Europe, and started working consulting for Gucci on a couple of projects and other fashion. They're called multi-brand showrooms. So essentially like the place where brands try to, if you're a new young luxury brand, this is how you sort of get discovered. So I started working with them, and I was sitting in London and like I said, working both with fashion houses, then kind of pivoted more towards sustainable fashion and rental. And like, I had made it up in my mind, this was going to be my like next career. I'm going to like be the CEO of a luxury clothing rental company, kind of like Rent the Runway, but a little more upscale. I was an investor in one in the States and going to acquire one in London. And then COVID hit. And it was really interesting because rental is done. No one's going anywhere. No one, at least for a period of time. And the fashion industry in particular was going to take a really hard hit. And a lot of rental actually, in a weird way, relied on the fact that excess clothing was always being produced, and therefore you had some product that could be rented, which is actually the antithesis of sustainability. But anyway, we can get another time. So I'm sitting in London and didn't know what I was going to do. One of my best friends, who was like real tech guy from Silicon Valley, sent me an invite to Clubhouse, and he was like, "Oh, you're gonna love this. Are you bored? You're great. You're gonna have the best time." So he sends me this invite, and literally, like, I find myself like a real addict. Like, I like wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. in London. I'd be in the bathroom hiding, like on Clubhouse, talking to strangers, and then like I'd be up late at night. And after a while, my boyfriend was literally like, "Who are you talking to? What are you doing?" Because it really felt like I was sneaking away to like just talk to these people, like, literally most of whom were complete strangers to me, and I was just completely obsessed. And I didn't know either of the founders, but I was constantly like sending in support. Not even that like something was wrong, but like, you should really be talking to these people. And I have an idea about this, and you could do this. And after a while, my boyfriend was just like, all you're doing is talking about Clubhouse. I don't know why you didn't go work for those guys. I was like, this is not a terrible idea. Like, never really built an internet community before, but yeah, I could probably do that. So
I can figure that shit out.
I could probably do this.
I love you.
Anyway, so there you go. And I talked to Paul and Rohan for a series. I mean, it wasn't like Jimmy. Let me put it this way. It wasn't as easy sell as Jimmy and Omar.
Right.
Rohan and Paul were like, we dated for a while. Let's put it that way. I consulted for them, and I spoke to you about it in advance, like before I even took the job. I was like, what do you think of this idea? Like, I am obsessed with the product, but that doesn't mean you should go work for every company that you love their product. Right. And the more I worked with them, the more I loved them, the more I loved our team, the more I loved not just the product. I really started to see myself for the first time as a product person. I think I'd always been like, oh, I'm not a product person because I've never done that. Right. But the truth is, what I realized is like how many of my skill sets actually made me really good at product, because it was really just a series of collecting insights and intel from people. And if you have relationships and you build relationships quickly, it's easier to sort of develop that. In addition, it's like just understanding, having a sensibility is the best way to put it, but having a sensibility about how people are using things and how they may use things, and always having that layer of like a lens of consumerism that I think sometimes a lot of people in tech don't have. They definitely know how to build a product, but then I think they're always missing that lens of like, but is this will the consumer actually want to use it in that way, or do they, so I think that was, I recognized that early on, and I think Paul and Rohan were amazing at including me in all of the conversations to this day. Like I think we have such a small team that I'm involved in everything. And so I think it's probably been this has been in the last 6 months, like my biggest professional growth for sure. Like, wow. Not my question.
Wow. Yeah. Well, look, much has been said about Clubhouse. It is definitely the conversation of the moment. I mean, I don't want to my mom doesn't know about Clubhouse, right? So, but in the circles of influence and culture and the places that we traffic and move weight in, it has certainly been the conversation. I appreciate you there. And most importantly, I've said this publicly, said it privately, and we'll say it even publicly again. I do think that you are the best decision they've made for these reasons. I think that Silicon Valley this is the first time I've seen Silicon Valley move at the speed of culture. And the only way you're going to move at the speed of culture is to have somebody like you who understands, but can see the whole court, and I think, you are one of the best decisions they've made, and directly responsible for what I call onboarding force multipliers. Force multipliers, for those of you that read my work, are those that I think their mere presence creates a halo effect. But it's not just about, hey, let's invite all the celebrities and get them on, and get them involved. But it's those individuals in culture who can their presence and their ecosystem creates a flywheel, which is the term that all Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road VCs want to hear. And they talk like that, but they don't really know how to leverage culture to do that. So whilst much has been said about the 10 million and the, first investment from Andreessen Horowitz, not a lot has been said about your role there. And I don't think you're out there trying to, fish for PR or press. And I appreciate you even coming on here this morning. But I think when we unpack the story of Clubhouse's success, hiring you was the smartest thing that they did. And I don't just say this because you're my friend. I say this because had they put somebody else in that role, I don't think that the fly would be turning with the same velocity. And so, yeah, so I think that I'm really excited that you're there, and I'm excited that Silicon Valley did what Silicon Valley should do. When putting someone like you in that role, and there's other Steph Simons out there who kind of who possess this kind of like odd, ambidextrous kind of skill sets, and they're black, they're white, they're yellow, they're Puerto Rican, they're Haitian, they're female, they're gay, they're straight, they're all kinds of things. And I think and I love that about you too, is because you have a wide sense of, or no sense of, you told me, identity politics. But I think it's someone who has that kind of skill that Silicon Valley needs to think about when they hire. And I appreciate that you're there, and I think that you need, not that you need, because you're not fishing for it, but when we unpack and look at the stack that it's built on culture, and culture doesn't happen just because you have Andreessen Horowitz or Ben Horowitz or Nas rapping, or it happens because somebody's actually talking to LeBron. Like the same thing with Beats by Dre. Beats by Dre doesn't happen unless the characters are there. I worked on Beats before you showed up. I remember, you can have headphones, but you need the relationship. So I'm really excited to be in this role.
Yeah, like I said, it's been a wild ride, and I think everything from all the stuff that you mentioned, a lot of the reasons why we've been in the headlines is because it is like a perfect case study on when people come together who might not otherwise come together, what are sort of the consequences of that happening, and then what is your obligation, what is your role when you created that space to either diffuse or sort of make humanity work. The truth is, it's hard. Yeah. And I think that's been really, I have never had emotional labor, as people say, emotional labor. I've never had emotional labor at a job. And so I think that's probably what also sort of adds to but it's also that's the addicting part, is that you're growing. If you're someone that really thrives and wants to constantly seek self development, it's just that you're both gaining insights that will help you in your life. And like I said, this year, for all of us, for any of us that have lived privileged lives, it's been amazing for me to see, not just that we built the platform, like I said, sort of constantly tapping into culture, on culture, but the specific veins of culture that have never been present on early beta programs. The amount of Atlanta people, sort of the Black experience, and I'm going to give a very narrow, defined view of the Black experience, but the Black experience in Atlanta is very different than the Black experience in other places. And I think that the concentration of people on our platform that are the way they see the platform is this opportunity. I love it. To me, I'm calling him up every other day. I'm okay, how can we help you? What can we do? Okay, great idea for the show. Okay, I know you think you want that to be a podcast, but I actually don't think that's the right way to do it. I literally feel like I'm getting to watch people at the nascent stages of their own personal hockey stick growth, and it's amazing, but it's also fraught with dynamic that I don't think I was prepared for at the beginning at all. And so it's been amazing, and I'm super excited. Like I said, I think the thing that, as I said earlier, what I'm drawn to is this combination of new revenue and also creativity. And in my role is technically right now head of content and community, but really what I'm going to focus on is a lot of the creators, and sort of, because our business model is around direct monetization to creators, help supporting them, identifying them, helping support them. And so that's why I joke that my fun title is I'm head of A&R at Clubhouse.
Yes.
Mm.
I would prefer you use that. And I'm joking, not joking, because actually we've talked about this at length.
Mm.
I think that I always say, like, why did Issa Rae, who already had Awkward Black Girl popping on and on YouTube, how come YouTube didn't take Issa Rae to HBO or CAA and like get that deal done? And I think the promise and opportunity of Clubhouse, as I feel for a lot of platforms, is like, don't pay the culture back in invites, pay them back in thoughtful partnership and handholding and
Yep.
you talk. I hear that, and while the invites are great because it helps fuel the conversation and the people that are on the platform, what's going to be greater is the legend and the narrative that
Yeah.
is the place that built that career. Just like when we were in Summit Series, like the legend is, Summit Series is the place where Travis, who had this idea for a company called Uber, meets this person. Now, whether or not exactly that's how it happened,
The legend.
but there's a legend, and I feel like they need to hire a legend to create legend. And we'll just kind of end on that note. So I really appreciate you, Steph. And we should do this more.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. This is like I love being in the green room, by the way. I'm like, I can see him, but I know he could see me. This is great.
No,
Thank you so much. You're a legend of yourself, and I think you are obviously one of the force multipliers that I quickly targeted as I came onto Clubhouse, and I appreciate so much of what you built, and I also appreciate your constant candor and honesty about sort of your experience, and I think just the honesty that you approach building community is never lost on me, and one of the things that I think I love most about you. So thank you for hosting me in the middle of the Authenticated community.
Busy days for us both. This was really special. You got my wheels turning and my juices flowing, and that's all. That's all one can ask in the course of a day. Thank you so much. Thanksgiving to your family. Congratulations to your. I need to meet. I don't think we've ever had a conversation with the fiance.
Finn.
And we'll get Finn on here one time. I've heard about him, but I can't wait to meet him. And yeah, enjoy your time in Oklahoma, and I'm sure I'll hear you or see you soon.
In the house. All right. I'll see you later.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye.